So this travel ban coming on top of the blacklist, you've really got to wonder what the US plan is heading into these trade talks.
Absolutely. There's a very dark cloud hanging over the trade talks that are now supposed to take place Thursday and Friday in Washington. These will be the first high-level talks of these officials since late July. And, you know, in between that, there's been an escalation of tariffs. There's been the U.S. has signed a limited trade agreement with Japan. A lot of developments have taken place in the trade realm. And also there was the EU case that was decided at the WTO, so the U.S. is going to put tariffs on Europe. And so there's been, you know, a mix of things happening. And I think ahead of these trade talks, things were looking like maybe the U.S. might go for a mini deal, maybe there'd be some progress to be made. And of course, these latest actions really throw a wrench in that plan right now.
Tom, after every U.S. trade action, we have seen Beijing react in a more measured way. What have we heard so far?
Well, we heard some pretty forceful comments from the foreign ministry officials yesterday speaking in Beijing, saying that they would retaliate against this decision to blacklist 8 Chinese companies. They say that we should stay tuned. Now, that may involve non-tariff barriers. It may involve them publishing their unreliable entities list that would restrict the access for some U.S. companies to the Chinese market. That is something we're going to have to watch very closely. They also said that the U.S. should stop interfering in China's internal affairs. They were talking, of course, about Xinjiang and these human rights violations that the U.S. are pointing to now as a justification for the blacklisting of those companies, but also, of course, this visa ban. Now, just for some context, Xinjiang is in the far western region of China. It borders Afghanistan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and it is there that, according to the United Nations, China is holding in detention camps up to 1 million Muslim Uyghurs and Kazakhs. And China says that this is all an attempt by them to tackle Islamic radical Islam in that region. But they have faced pressure from the United Nations and from reporting and from agencies who say that this is a gross human rights violation. In fact, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said it was the stain of the century. Again, China saying that this is about them trying to tackle Islamic radical Islam. And again, this is another attempt opening up a new front in terms of human rights violations from the US side as they attempt to pressure China.
And Sarah, just as Tom mentioned, Washington may not be done when it comes to pressuring Beijing. We are now hearing that we could see those restrictions on portfolio flows into China. What do we know?
So we do know Jenny Leonard and Sean Donnan, two of our trade reporters here at Bloomberg, broke the news about a week and a half ago that the U.S. is looking at these investment restrictions on China. What we have learned and what we reported today is that they've really narrowed that discussion down to U.S. pension funds and trying to limit their exposure to Chinese companies, whether it's through indexes or other means. And so I think what this shows is that the Trump administration is really getting serious about new ways to put pressure on China. And by doing this, I think, you know, they're really opening up a new front. Capital controls, of course, on China would be another level and entering the financial services realm that is just, again, a new low. And I think, you know, we have them talking about human rights as an issue now, wrapping that up into the trade talks. There's a whole sort of hornet's nest right now that I think it's going to be hard to imagine how they'll be able to find common ground over the next 2 days in talks, to be able to look each other in the eye at the table in Washington and really have faith that they can negotiate a trade deal.